Hi, Christy. Thank you so much for coming on to Everyday Endorphins. It's so great to have you here.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I feel like a part of your aura and energy is living in my fridge because I have dozens and dozens of Honey Mama in my apartment, which means every day I have just needed a little sweet treat. And it's been the perfect non-alcohol nightcap, I guess, is having chocolate literally every day. And it's delicious. So that has been a big endorphin boost for me as of lately. And I just have a lot of questions. So I'll start with one of the most basic ones. How did you get interested in the health and wellness space? And where did this whole inspiration around creating a chocolate company come from?
It really ties into what you just shared about how you've been enjoying like the little hit of chocolate every day. And that's really at the root of it, where my interest was. I got interested in the health and wellness space in college. I was really wanted to study nutrition and I sucked at science pretty hardcore. I loved the social sciences, so I ended up getting a degree in sociology, and I was also interested in psychology and all of the things like about like what you were just talking about before the show started about positivity and positive psychology. And so that's totally my orbit. And anyway, I have always been a mover, an athlete, somebody who takes care of their body. I naturally like healthy foods. Like I've always just been that person who loves salad and loves like, I choose stuff that just tastes good and happens to be healthy. And so I've always kind of had that in my core being. And then I had a bakery for a number of years with my mom and my sister and my husband. And my mom was really the creative force behind that bakery. We were doing a lot of the recipes that we grew up eating, family recipes of incredibly delicious, high quality, cakes and pies and cookies and things like this in Portland, Oregon. And we had a brick and mortar space. And so my interest of starting Honey Mamas really intersected with my health and wellness journey, my kind of own health and wellness core being in an interesting way, because I was owning and running this bakery in the early 2000s. I had two little kids at the time. And my best friend at the time had an autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis. The doctors could name what it was, but they didn't have a cure for her. And they just told her it was debilitating and it would continue to get worse, and that, they were giving her just kind of random, I don't know, it was she felt very hopeless. And I was at that time, I'd been running the bakery. I was fairly exhausted. I was run down all the time. She said she was going to do this cleanse to try to see if if there's a way that food could impact her autoimmune disease. I did the cleanse with her as a support. And this cleanse was called the Body Ecology Diet. And it was all about gut health and candida and like understanding kind of like how these things that are going on in our body can completely impact all sorts of things, not just our physical health, but our mental health, our emotional health. And so 3 weeks into this cleanse together, my energy levels were phenomenal. I was super clear thinking. I had energy for my kids. I had energy for my business. I felt I was having like kind of a lot of anxiety during this time as well. And it was just this really amazing moment where I had this huge aha around food as medicine. And she discovered she was a celiac during this process. She completely turned her autoimmune disease around and was able to manage it through the foods that she ate. And it was really the seed of the beginning of Honey Mamas, because it kind of was like, when you're doing things in your life and everything just feels like lined up, like it's like, oh, this makes absolute sense to me. And it's something that's kind of a synthesis of what you've been interested in or maybe moving towards for a long time and just didn't know it. Anyway, so that was really how those kind of worlds of like my interest in nutrition, but sucking at science and not really being able to pursue that, not, wanting to really do that in college. And then really being able to have all of a sudden these years of experience running this bakery and knowing what that looks and feels like to put recipes together and to do that on a larger level than home, and also what business feels like. And then having my friend go through this extreme experience, I just started, the wheels were really starting to turn for me around gut health and how there really wasn't anything like this in the grocery store shelves at that time. And this is 2010. So I was feeling just super inspired to figure out some way to kind of fill a niche that I saw kind of beginning to sprout in the grocery stores around food as medicine and like just simply better for you, and but take these my background and kind of really put those into play, all those pieces into play.
Yeah, that's such an interesting story because you have like that business perspective from the bakery, but then also this like personal tie to health and well-being and seeing your friend struggle with her autoimmune disorder. And when you did that cleanse, were you at the time, were you facing any health issues or you just wanted to kind of see how it could improve your life? Because you mentioned energy levels improving. And, I think that's actually something I struggle with. Like I've noticed my energy levels can be really low and I'm like super dependent on coffee and now I've become I guess addicted. But like I definitely have 1 to 2 cups a day, which isn't horrible. There are people that do like 3 to 5 for sure, but even with coffee I'm like why do I feel not energized? Maybe I need to do this cleanse and reconsider, like take a deep dive into my diet cuz I definitely could have a better stocked fridge, that's for sure. But I'm curious like what your health felt like at that time and maybe what intentions you had going into that cleanse.
So the part that I left out about my story was that at that same time, I was pretty much splitting from the bakery. Like we were having family problems running a business together, surprise, surprise, which we remedied, but still like it was a challenging moment. So I was having a lot of anxiety. I'm sure it was coming from that. I was very close to my family. And so I'd all honestly, like for my whole life, I think I had had periods of kind of depressive episodes that not like huge. And it wasn't something that I was, treated for and medicated for, but it was pretty, low grade, and it was, and it would hang around sometimes. And during this time of my life, my girls were young, they were middle school and active. And I was going through stress and strain personally and not feeling great and really drinking too much. I was really trying to manage my stress with a drink or two and just trying to kind of do the regular things that we do. And I mean, I would exercise and all that, but it just wasn't helping. And I think my cortisol levels were so high because I had been stressed out, chronic stress for so many years, running the bakery, raising the 2 kids. And this is something I think that we, like what you're saying, like you're tired, we all walk around with a tremendous amount of stress. And, just this age that we live in is a whole topic, right? Like there's a lot of information. There's a ton of pressure to live up to. And I think that even during the 2010s, it was different. Like social media was not happening like it is now, but my life was in a place where I was stressed and I needed a change. And I think so emotional was dragging the emotional stress was definitely dragging on my energy and my thinking and all of that. I also discovered I had Hashimoto's at that time. So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid. So I don't know when I developed that, but that is something where you have to eliminate like gluten and dairy primarily. So that in itself was a huge aha. And I was able to kind of eliminate those 2 things pretty regularly. I mean, I'm very, very strict about gluten. And when I backslid, I pay for it. Just the inflammation, the response that happens in my body when I backslide and eat gluten. I mean, I really don't, but off and on for years, I'd love a beer or like, good bread or whatever. And so it's hard to always stick to that severe diet. And anyway, that again, those were hugely impactful in kind of thinking about, I pretty much immediately after I had done this cleanse with her, started thinking about what could I do that's going to address this. And it's not just solving my problem, but I know that this is common. This is more common than I know. If like that I'm having this experience, I'm not living in a bubble, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, it's fascinating just to hear your story, but also how there's so many stories that are, reminiscent of this truth that stress really impacts our health and our wellness, our gut health and our gut microbiome. Like everything is all very interconnected. And, I'm curious, like, is it possible to live a life that's completely stress free? I don't think so. I'd love to crack the code to how the blue zones do it.
Yeah, I think about the blue zones a lot, actually.
I don't even know if the blue zones live completely stress-free lives. Like, I think to a certain extent we need some sort of level of stress, but maybe it's when it becomes chronic or like debilitating, that's when it starts to negatively impact our health. So, how do we find that balance? How do we walk that line? It's very nuanced.
Yeah, totally non sequitur, but it's kind of something I want to, or maybe just like it is makes sense, but like the whole blue zone thing, I think is interesting because it's like, okay, maybe you can't mimic the life of living on some sweet little Japanese island somewhere and garden all day and have community with your friends half the other day and then walk up hills all the time. It's like, I feel like if you can just pull right pieces from that, and I just moved into a neighborhood where I can walk uphill for 30 minutes straight every morning. And I just have been loving it. And I was thinking about the blue zones. I was like, I may still live in like United States in a fast-paced, city and everything else that's going on, but there's this little piece of sunshine and nature that I can grab in the morning and just walk. Because I remember that being one of the things, like a lot of them, like one of the things that threaded them together was that they all lived in like really hilly areas. I might be wrong, but that's a memory from what I learned.
I actually haven't watched the series, which I need to do, but I really like your point around holding on to like one quality maybe that is representative of a lifestyle of being in the blue zones and just seeing how you can adapt that into your life. And I think that's really representative of just like how we can incorporate better health and wellness practices into our lives because, of course, it's not realistic that we can just move to a remote island in Greece or Japan or wherever and healthiest lives and thrive every single day. I wish that was the case, but we can't do that. So I like your point around finding like one small practice that you can replicate in your environment and your ecosystem and kind of gravitating towards that or using that as like a daily anchor that maybe is grounding and actually helps you feel more in alignment with yourself. I recently got back from vacationing in Greece and in Italy, and I'm kind of in this like post Europe honeymoon phase where I'm like, get me out of New York. Like, I want to go back to Europe and just healthier, happier. And maybe one day that'll be an opportunity or a possibility, but in the immediate future, it's not. And so this is a good reminder for me actually to think about, well, what are some things that I like made me feel healthy and grounded while I was in Greece and in Italy? And how can I translate those practices into my lifestyle in New York City? And coming back to food and nutrition, I think it's well known that the quality of food, the produce is much better in Europe than it is in America. And maybe this is like a reminder for me to think about how I can nourish myself better here in New York and kind of adopt more of that Mediterranean diet and lifestyle into my routine. But when we think about just how nutrition impacts our health and our wellness, you were talking about this cleanse that you were on, this program that you were doing, and how that experience informed your inspiration to start Honey Mamas. So, walk us through the inception of that idea. So, when you were thinking about marrying health and wellness with something more of like a guilty pleasure, like chocolate, desserts, and sweets, what did that look like for you? The creative brainstorming process, ideation?
Well, I'll start with the fact that I immediately went straight to, I wanted to do a highly functional product because I was so impacted by adding one of the core principles of this diet was fermented foods. And it was just like cultured vegetables and adding fermented foods to every meal so that there's this digestibility thing happening. So your gut is like you're putting premium gas in your tank every day just by having simple foods and then eating these fermented foods. So that to me, I felt like there was nothing like that at the grocery stores. And long story short, I ran into all sorts of issues trying to start that idea. I was having licensing challenges. I was not able to find the right space. Nothing was working right. And I ended up dropping that and going, this is not the right direction for me. So I need to kind of go back to the drawing board. And how I ended up getting into more of like this treat space, I think, was after realizing the fermented foods thing was just like, I was very disappointed because I was like, I thought this would be it. Because I was like, there's not cultured vegetables on the market. Like, it seems like such a great idea. And so I was kind of just trying to sit with myself for a minute. And what came up for me was I started playing with raw foods, essentially just, the like date and pecan nut. You put it in your blender and you make a crust for like a cheesecake. And then you use like cashew nuts that are soaked overnight to cream. And then you make this like beautiful, like cream cheese kind of, cheesecake thing. And with this fresh blueberry compote on top with like maple syrup as the sweetener, like those types of things. And I started getting really into like the amount of nutrition that is in these like same vibe of a dessert that I've been making at Blue Gardenia, my bakery, where we're adding processed flours and, like everything, refined sugar, cane sugar. And I had learned that, through that diet, through that cleanse, just how all of those things actually are pulling the energy from my cells and pulling the energy away from my vitality instead of giving me vitality when I'm eating them. And so this kind of more raw food focus had that whole light bulb thing was happening where I was like, okay, this I like this seems really fun and they're delicious. And so I kind of just riffed on that for a while. And where I ended up kind of going with that was I couldn't land on one or two products. Like, I really knew I wanted to launch something in the grocery stores because in the consumer products world, that's where people are shopping to take their food home. And I had that business experience with the bakery, and we had sold gourmet cinnamon rolls and pecan rolls to like Whole Foods and New Seasons Market and these local area stores. And I understood what that was to create a product for a grocery store. It's different than making it at your bakery that you're going to sell that day. And I understood the buyer relationships on that level and kind of like what the margins could look like. So that really quickly had kind of come into my consciousness when I was like, saw my life change from this cleanse, saw my friend Jen completely heal herself through changing her diet. And so I thought, okay, this feels like I could start like a very simple product line and have it be on the grocery store shelves. So anyway, just a little backstory on that. And so the simplicity of the product needed to be there. And so I hadn't kind of hit that yet until a friend of mine gave me a recipe that I called bird suet, that it was so full of like coconut oil and really just so full of unrefined coconut oil that it would just kind of melt it in your hands when you tried to eat it. But it tasted incredible. It made you feel incredible. Her nutritionist had given it to her when she was breastfeeding and couldn't like get enough energy she was just like, new mom, breastfeeding, all this stuff. And it was like a protein kind of bar. And I riffed on that and took it from kind of this like bird suet, highly functional protein experience. And I started kind of taking this element of like what I grew up with, which was, and my grandma used to make fudge every year and send it to us in the mail. She was, didn't live in Portland. And it was this really incredible texture and taste experience, like during the holidays that I would always look forward to. And like the cakes that we would make at the bakery and brownies. It's like how I want that. And so I was able to kind of transform this raw protein bar idea and turn it into that, simplified the ingredients down and really looked at what I had learned from the body ecology diet was how impactful unrefined oils were, choosing oils. I got super turned on to coconut oil at that time and like the benefits of it. I tried all sorts of like different sweeteners. Like I was trying coconut sugar and lower glycemic sweeteners that weren't refined sugar, that had a less of an impact on our system. And when I ate honey, I felt the best. Like honey for me, for whatever reason, was just like hit all the marks on like after I ate it, whatever I was putting it in, I just was like, okay, this sweetener I want to use. So I kind of was just doing this thing where I was grabbing these elements of what I had learned with what I'd been kind of working on. And I put sprouted almonds, unrefined coconut oil, raw honey, Himalayan pink salt, and cocoa powder together in a food processor and created my first Honey Mama's bar. And that was, I literally took one bite and I saw the packaging, that my first packaging. It was one of the coolest experiences I have ever had. And I ate it at like about 3 or 4 in the afternoon when you're having that energy dip. And I was kind of freaking out because it was so good. And I was like, I could make like four flavors of this, and I could put this at the grocery store and people would eat it.
100%. I mean, I'm like addicted now. It's delicious. All the different flavors are so good. I love chocolate. Like it's definitely my guilty pleasure. And speaking of guilty pleasures, I think what's really interesting about your product is that it is in the treat space, but it feels guilt-free because it is made with ingredients that are actually good for you. And I don't know how much research you've done in like sugar or certain foods that impact your cortisol levels and how that affects your hormones, but I've dealt a lot with hormonal issues and have been told to have, a diet that consists of a low glycemic index with certain foods and to refrain from sugar. And I think I've struggled with like putting guilt on having desserts or eating certain types of foods versus others. And I think a lot of women struggle with this too, with body image and needing to eat healthy foods. And, it's interesting when we even just talk about this label of healthy foods. Sometimes what may seem healthy may actually not be good for your system and for your body, even if it's considered like a healthy vegetable or whatnot, depending on your gut microbiome and what's compatible with you. And so I'd love to talk a little bit more also just about like your thoughts on being in the treat space, but having this healthier alternative and kind of getting rid of the guilt around indulging in something that tastes good. We're meant to savor and enjoy life. And what a shame that would be if we restricted ourselves from experiencing, the wide range of pleasurable foods and experiences.
I just think that all of that, like, honestly, like when we had the bakery, people would walk by the booth. We had a farmer's market booth that we would do. And people would, I just remember a few times of people going, oh, I can't even get close to your booth because I just can't eat that. And I just remember thinking to myself, and this was before I did like a ton of research on, well, just this whole like nourishing foods and all of that stuff. And I just thought to myself, but yet, even though I'm not a food scientist, I know enough, I'm intuitive enough to understand. And I think that we also are really impacted by how we feel about what we're about to eat and the flavor and the pleasure principle around like enjoying something delicious. I know that impacts our health, like in a positive way, if we're feeling so good about something that we're about to do or eat. So anyway, that's just a little anecdote to the fact that my whole reason for starting Honey Mamas was so that it addresses exactly what you just said, which is you are trying to find a way to have something that's a treat without feeling that you're doing something bad or wrong, which that's a whole nother podcast. And it's there's so much flippant pressure that's put on us. I feel like women, especially, to be perfect and all this BS. And so much of that happens through food. And with Honey Mamas, the pleasure of eating it is so high. The textural experience, I feel like, is a really big part of that. And because of people will laugh about this because they'll be like, well, I eat a whole bar. But, the fact is like, they're big bars that we make. And really it's nutrient dense. And so it's like a little should kind of be able to go a longer way rather than eating, a 500 calorie piece of cake that's full of processed flours and processed sugars, which are immediately going to spike your glucose and immediately talk about impacting your hormones, but instead give you something that has 100% pure cacao, unrefined fat, coconut oil that's going to be an excellent delivery system for the honey, which is the sweetener in the bar, and those both happen to be antifungal, antibacterial, all of these really great qualities. And then the nuts or coconut I use in some of them, and having that as be the base. So that's got nourishment in it. So nothing in the bar, everything is nutritive in the bar. And whether or not you eat the whole thing, and it's a 330 calorie snack that happens to be, what is that? It would be like, it's 10 grams of sugar per, but that's all coming per serving, so that's all coming from honey. I think that my heart of hearts was wanting to exactly do what you're talking about, where being in that space and being able to say, this is something that you can eat like a treat. I couldn't call it chocolate because I don't have cocoa butter in it. It's just been a really interesting experience to be a treat in the grocery store, be in the fridge next to protein bars, mind you, is where where we are in the fridge. But to be able to convey to people, this is actually healthy. It's a really healthy, like nutrient rich option from, say, a Snickers bar or a Mars bar or something where you're going to have all of these really negative impacts on your blood sugar and everything else right away. It's this really nice opportunity to eat something that's nutrient rich. And yes, it still has calories in it. And I would never try to make something that didn't have that. Like life, we like to eat sweets. Most people enjoy to have a sweet at least once a day. And so how can you do that in a way that's life-giving? And it's really been an interesting thing. I'm 11 years into the business, and we're just now trying to crack this code from going from growing the business in the natural grocery channel, which is like the Whole Foods of the world, to more of like the Kroger vein, and like Costco and these places where we can impact more people. And I think that our work there is around creating a little bit of maybe a smaller product and just tweak, kind of speaking. We're really kind of playing with and working on, like, how can we brand it from the shelf where people immediately see that as like an alternative to the Snickers, and so as you and I are speaking, we're really kind of playing with this idea right now. Cocoa truffle bar, I used to call them nectar bars. Like, it's just been a whole process to try to name it, make it something people know what it is. It's in the fridge. It's been an interesting process, but it's working so far.
Clearly. I mean, it's an exciting place to be right now with these thoughts that you have around how to bring the brand to the next level and how to get people to see it like maybe like a healthier alternative to a Snickers, like to influence consumer behavior to move away from the processed stuff into like something that tastes equally as good, but is actually going to fuel you. So, what an exciting point to be in right now. And just going off of kind of what we've been speaking about, how we can really transform our mood through food. You made a really interesting point earlier around how the mood that you have before you actually consume the food is just as important, right? And feeling excited about what you're going to consume is kind of half the battle. I found the moments in life where I felt the most confident about my body and the healthiest in my body and the strongest is when I've actually had a really positive outlook and healthy relationship to what I was ingesting and consuming, and kind of took the emphasis away from maybe like sticking to a specific diet or needing to be healthy, quote unquote, and more so tapping intuitively into how I feel when I eat something. It speaks to a lot of what we've been talking around like mindset and having that healthier outlook on, what we consume and how we structure our lives. And on that, vein, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about your top 5 hyper functional ingredients, to elevate your outlook on life. So, taking this metaphor away from the food space, like what are those qualities or ingredients that you think really contribute to having a healthier outlook on our lives?
Yeah, food specifically. It's an interesting question because there's a lot. There's so many. I would probably say always starting with like proteins. So these would be my top 5. I think I would say protein, fat, protein. So protein being like fish, meat, eggs, tofu, fat, cod liver oil, unrefined coconut oil, olive oil. Then I would say cacao on whatever form you take it, straight up 100% chocolate, in a Honey Mama's bar, however, but pure cacao. I would say fermented foods for gut health or a probiotic if your body can't handle fermented foods. I would say sweeteners. So I choose honey personally, but it's like limiting the sweeteners that you use and making them, like dates are a great sweetener, something that is coming from a natural source and easy for your body to assimilate, staying way far away from all the crap that's like an artificial sweetener. I think something that really doesn't get talked about a ton is just like hydration is just like a key, like water and hydration and having it be, electrolytes in your water where you're actually staying hydrated. So, I mean, I know that we all hear this and we know this, but eating eating whole food ingredients, staying away from ultra processed foods, being mindful of your sweeteners, staying hydrated, the whole mushroom game I'm fascinated by. I take like a 7 mushroom blend every morning. I put it in my smoothie that's just like got all the good mushrooms in it, but I'm not super well educated on it, but I'm really jazzed on what mushrooms do for us. And collagen, I feel like that's just great for gut health.
I love your response because it's very simple and it breaks down health into like those basic building blocks. And I think we tend to overcomplicate health in our lives and what we need to eat and how I need to exercise and all these things. But at the end of the day, it's really, I think, coming back to those fundamental basics and keeping it simple and like easily mentally and physically digestible, I guess. Like the more simple, the better. And I think that also probably ties into the philosophy of the blue zones as well. And at least the diets that they carry. But, as we transition in this interview, Christy, I want to ask a few questions about happiness because that's really what the podcast is about. And I know we started this interview with kind of alluding to the joy and endorphins that I feel from having honey mamas because truly it's something I look forward to if I want a sweet treat. Now I have like a fully stocked fridge of them. It's delicious. And so, my first question that I have for you is how you define happiness in your life and what that looks like to you.
Happiness to me comes in the form of connection, I think would be the first word that kind of comes up for me because I think at the root of it, there's like a sense of connection to yourself that feels good, that feels where you're able to be present with yourself and trust yourself and like yourself and be kind to yourself. So that for me personally is like a pretty strong root of happiness I've really worked on a lot of that over the years of not being so hard on myself about things, being just a little bit more, I don't have to know everything or be everything or do everything and just like take a chill pill in that zone. So happiness, I think, starts with that self-acceptance and that truthfulness to self. And then, extending from that, I would definitely say being and connecting with myself and with other people in a sense of ease and joy. Probably some of my happiest moments are with my daughters who are now 27 and 24, and they're probably around your age.
Yeah, I'm 25, so I'm right in the middle.
Yeah, you're right in the middle. It's such a cool age, honestly, for me to have children in this age because they're both just living their lives. And, so anyway, there's just a ton of happiness and we have a deep connection and that feels like really core to like my sense of happiness. And I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but it is, I think having a sense of gratitude really goes a long way for a sense of happiness and trying to be myself the most instead of trying to be someone else. I mean, I think that like, it doesn't matter who I'm with or what I'm doing. Like, that's when I'm at my happiness is when there's like a state of play that's occurring on some level and that can kind of come in lots of different forms.
Right. I mean, these are all science-backed responses, actually. Connection is so critical to our well-being. The strength of our interpersonal connections directly ties to our sense of subjective well-being. And then, of course, if you have good company that you surround yourself with, that's going to encourage you and inspire you to invest in yourself and to connect with yourself and to have that strong sense of self. So it's, for lack of a better term, interconnected. And I've noticed too in my life, I feel at my happiest when I feel like a sense of being content and at ease with the way things play out, not feeling in resistance to things I may want to change, but rather like accepting how things are and leaning into the natural flow of life's events. And the final question that I want to leave you with, Christy, is something that I ask every guest on the podcast. What is something that brings you a bit of endorphins every day? Is there like a practice, a habit, a ritual, something that you look forward to that just brings you incremental joy?
Well, definitely chocolate. Definitely chocolate. And that's usually happens in the afternoon or evening. I dance. I've danced for years and years with a group of women. And it's not something I do every single day, but I would say that is one of my best endorphin places. One of the things I do every day, though, that is endorphin producing is I get out and I go walk. It kind of doesn't matter unless we're having really bad ice or something. So I used to run for years and years, and then it just got it really hard on my joints and stuff. And I just do just really great walks. And I think being outside. So for me, any opportunity where I'm as close to water as I can be, like talk about when I was in New York, I would go to the water and I would walk along the boardwalk and I would walk as far as I could. I had a great little walk, like in the bigness of the city, I will find the natural spaces. And so I think those are kind of the huge, huge ones for me of just like endorphins, being connected to the natural world. At work in the office too, it's just like the in-between moments with the team of having like playful getting loose. And I get a lot of happiness. And I don't know if that's endorphins, but it feels like endorphins I think, and that's going back to the connection piece, I really like the people that I work with. And that feels like, yeah, that's pretty huge.
I love that. I mean, I love asking this question because it's more a philosophical question rather than what are certain specific things you do that actually boost your own endorphins. Because it could be serotonin, it could be dopamine. But for the purpose of the podcast, it's endorphins. And I think, for me, it's also like being near water. I love walking down the West Side Highway. I think there's a study that shows that people who just see water like are happier. So I love being near the water for sure. And movement is a huge one. I love to dance. Also, I think it's a really like fun way to just be a part of self-expression, and rhythm is really important to me. So I can relate to that one as well. And really everything you're talking about, it's like being in those flow-like experiences, which I've also talked about extensively on the podcast. There's a lot of cool science emerging in that area of flow-like states and how do we reach peak performance. So I totally agree with everything that you shared. And also chocolate. That is now my newest endorphin, is having Honey Mamas. And where can my listeners have their very own endorphins in their fridge? Where can they find Honey Mamas?
The best place to find it really is at your local grocery store. We're in the refrigerator. So we're going to be in like the grab and go, or like in the grab and go fridge, usually next to like Perfect Bar. I don't know if you're familiar with that protein bar brand, but we are usually shelved right next to those guys who we love. Or we're also in like the dairy yogurt set sometimes in grocery stores. So it's definitely in like the healthy snacking grab and go fridges is where you'll find our products. And we have honeymamas.com is a great place to go. And we will do like limited time editions sales online. And then you can also type in your zip code and find it at the store right by your neighborhood.
Amazing. Right now I'm loving the peanut butter one and like the coconut one. I forget the full name, but it's so good.
Yeah, coconut fudge. Mm-hmm.
Yes, the coconut fudge. Delicious. I think I also tried the mocha, if I'm remembering correctly. That was really good. So yeah, everyone out there listening, hit up your local grocery store and have an endorphin-filled fridge of Honey Mamas. Thank you so much, Christy. It was wonderful having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Stella. It's been a pleasure.